The White Sox blew a chance to pick up a late-season statement victory, and the latest defeat serves as a huge reminder why the bullpen must be upgraded in the offseason.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fan Side of the network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, the White Sox had the Yankees down to their final strike with a slim 2-1 lead, and the bullpen just could not get that third out. I want to discuss how that is just the latest example that the pen must be upgraded in the offseason. Then Andrew Benintendi's season is over, and Mike Tauchman is ailing, and Michael A. Taylor doesn't dive for a ball to possibly get the final out in the ninth inning to keep the game tied. So let's discuss why you'd rather see the kids play the rest of the week rather than the veterans. And finally, not going to do a retro segment today, as I want to discuss baseball announcing the ABS challenge system going into effect for next season. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so I've seen a couple social media posts asking, why did Michael A. Taylor just not dive for basically what became a bloop walk-off hit? Well, I'm going to actually get to that in the second segment, because focusing on Taylor not diving for a fly ball, that's actually burying the lead of why the White Sox lost last night. Brandon Eisert blew a 2-1 lead because he was basically trying to hulk up on a fastball to get strike three on Cody Bellinger, and then Steven Wilson comes in and just can't keep the game tied. Once again, the White Sox were not good in high leverage situations. Their bullpen arms are not very good in crunch time. And that's going to be the bane of Will Venable's bullpen philosophy unless some upgrades are happened. And that's why it became clear to me after watching the Yankees walk it off, they have to add more horses for Venable's bullpen philosophy to actually work. And to recap, what is Venable's bullpen philosophy that he's described and he talked about in spring training? Because remember that crazy idea that Mike Clevenger was going to be the closer, and Will Venable never acknowledged that there was going to be a closer. And I don't think he's ever said this season, this guy's the closer. He is more of the modern thinking that the most important outs don't always happen in the ninth inning. You might have to get the most important high leverage outs in the sixth inning, in the seventh inning, or the eighth. And how you get those big outs then is you use your best bullpen arms to get those outs whenever they appear. However, to those that are still the traditionalists, or to those that are still like, there's some holes in it. And there is. Because in single-digit run games, you still have old school standards applying. And if you don't have basically guys in the bullpen that can miss bats a lot, and you got to use weak contact and funky deliveries, well, it's going to leave a huge, huge hole. And if you go with your best guys early, that's going to leave you with Brandon Eisert and Steven Wilson left in the ninth. And if you're thinking, well, why wasn't Mike Vasil out there? Bullpen game tonight. So I got the feeling that they want him to work, the bulk of today's game. Same thing with Winkleman Gonzalez. Because Frazier Ellard is going to be the opener. So I got a feeling they're going to want Vasil to give you 3. Maybe Winkleman gives you 2. So that's why I think they weren't options. But for Venable's bullpen plan then to work, you got to load these guys. You got to load up the relief group with guys who have the stuff to execute in high leverage. And let's face it, Brandon Eisert is a low to medium leverage lefty you bring in the 6th or 7th, where you have a comfortable lead, and the starter could only go 5, or he'd go 6. I mean, he's not a bad. When you look at some of the stuff like that fastball, and a strikeout percentage too, you can kind of see, hey, this guy's a low leverage guy. He's probably the 7th or 8th man in your bullpen. And I think, he should be given a shot to actually compete for that role next year. But you got to stop putting him out there in these high leverage situations because he only throws in the low 90s with his fastball. And his changeup and slider, they can be deceptive, but it's not like, oh my gosh, this is elite stuff. That changeup is nowhere near Trevor Hoffman elite. Because he has a 4.32 ERA with a 3.52 FIP in medium leverage. So you can kind of see the numbers support that maybe he's 7 or 8. And again, he should also be a guy that you upgrade over too. Don't get me wrong on that. But when you're stuck with him as one of your options in high leverage, he's got a 9.95 ERA right now and a 5.51 FIP in those situations. He just doesn't overpower in those situations. And that's why he likely felt that he had to hulk up on Bellinger and try to throw that fastball as hard as he could. And what he does, he airmails it right over Kyle Teal's head because there's men at first and third. And guess what happens? Tying run scores on the wild pitch. And then Steven Wilson comes in, can't deliver to keep the game tied. This bullpen is 25th in the league in high leverage ERA at 10.23. 26th in FIP at 4.30. Left on base percentage, they're 19th. Medium leverage, though, the White Sox, they're 16th in the league with a 4.3 ERA, 19th in low leverage ERA. And if you're feeling like, man, Todd, you've tackled this subject a few times, it's because I have done shows like this in the past because they just can't keep winning these single-digit run games. And one of it is they just don't have the bullpen arms to execute Will Venable's vision. That means you got to upgrade the talent in the bullpen this offseason. And I know I've said, don't spend any money on the bullpen like the last rebuild did. But you can spend just a little bit of your budget next year on some guys on one-year deals that you can flip at the trade deadline. I was hammering home, sign Jacob Junis last offseason, and they wouldn't do it because they were on a shoestring budget. $37.1 million is committed to the team next season. So you should have at least some money to get some bridge guys right now and then continue to develop some of these power arms to get better at high leverage ERA. Because the White Sox are 14-35 in games decided by a single run. And I actually thought Venable stacked up the bullpen well in this game. Although Tyler Gilbert got me nervous in the sixth, but gets out of the jam that he creates with 2 back-to-back strikeouts and gets a double play. Or no, gets a force out that he needed. Jordan Leisure and Grant Taylor, they take the heart of the Yankees order in the 7th and 8th. Again, an example of what Venable is seeing. But the White Sox then had nobody else after that. None. And this should have been Colson Montgomery won the game for you on that towering 2-run blast in the 6th. But instead, again, it's another game where the bullpen just blows it. And they just don't have anybody else besides Leisure and Taylor that you could say, hey, they've got the stuff to be high leverage righty guys right now. Wilson has a 4.63 high leverage ERA. Although a weird stat, 0.226 BABIP. So the ball doesn't get put into play, but when it does, it's usually going for a run. And I just have come to the conclusion he does not handle the 9th inning well. So this offseason, Chris Getz has got to find better options and say, hey, let's try Cam Bouger to solve this problem, because that's what they did in the offseason. They want to get guys that probably are better in medium leverage situations. And then the guys that maybe have the velocity to succeed in high leverage, they just don't do well. And honestly, for Venable's theory to work, I think you need 6 guys who can handle high leverage. And right now, they got 2 who are emerging in Leisure and Taylor. And there's still hope that Taylor goes back to being a starter. And then you got Vassell, who's a kind of a jack of all trades. So you can see they still got to add a lot more pieces. Well, I want to discuss what I don't want to see the rest of the week, and it will involve Michael A. Taylor and some other veterans playing, and let's talk about that after the break. What do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? Confidence, pure confidence. And if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. That's exactly where Rugiet's Go Long comes in. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula, so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor, 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. So basically, think about that. Nobody needs to know your business about how, hey, I want to be confident. Very discreet. So, ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com. That's rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com. Promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure you use our code so they know we sent you. And there's nothing like catching a baseball game live. The energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person. But actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. It takes all the fun out of it. And that's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. That's right. You're going to know your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And how many times do you think, hey, I got this killer deal for these tickets, hit the checkout button, then boom, massive fees? Well, you're not going to get that with Gametime. They're all about being upfront with you so you know the deal you're getting when you are searching is the one you're going to pay at checkout. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other ways I've bought tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Either way, it gets you a 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. And really appreciate the folks that have reached out to me about what happened yesterday. Before I recorded yesterday's show, I had to have my dog put down. It was it's never easy to put down a family pet. And again, I'm a dog person. I love the unconditional love dogs just give you. My dog lived to be 12 years old, so I really appreciate the condolences. It really meant a lot. Had to tell my daughter that her first dog passed away. She took it well. As best as an 8-year-old trying to figure out the world can take it. That type of stuff. So I really appreciate everybody reaching out. And again, let's build a community, all that type of stuff. So I really appreciate the emails and the comments there. Now, I get the argument that if Michael A. Taylor lays out, maybe he comes up with a diving catch to end the 9th inning last night and the game is still tied. And if he misses, well, it's still probably going to be a walk-off hit. But make the effort. I get that argument. However, I can see a veteran like Taylor thinking, you know what, I'm going to play this off the bounce and see if I can get a throw home at the plate. I could see him thinking about that. And while I do think Taylor has lived up to his calling card of being a solid veteran defensive outfielder, I would say maybe he should have tried the diving, although I don't know if either one is going to happen because he's no spring chicken anymore. So I don't see him really throwing a seed home anymore. I mean, I have seen him still be able to jump and make home run robbing catches, so maybe I get the odds might have been better had he laid out for it. But the reason why, again, I'm not going to slam him too much is, it's the final week of the season. And while I have said, Taylor throughout the season still had some value to help these young guys learn how to win, I'm okay with him actually not playing the rest of the week. There's only 5 games left. You're on a collision course for another 100-loss season. Development matters. And I think it's just time to let these youngsters play the rest of the way. It's It's almost like when the Blackhawks didn't have Pat Maroon travel with the team because he was to the final two games in Canada last year because he was basically saying, I'm retiring. I'm not saying that Taylor's going to retire. I have no information, but even if they're not going to bring him back next year, you might want to have been like, you know what, you don't have to make this trip to New York or Washington unless you want to be around the team. But I don't think he needed to be out there. And I don't think he's now helping these youngsters learn how to win the last 2 days because of this year, this issue. And then, I saw it on Sunday. Bases loaded, 2 outs in that 7th inning where the White Sox actually probably could have won that game and blew it wide out, wide open. He's got a chance to break the game wide open, and he doesn't even lift the bat off his shoulders. And he was going for RBI walk offense. And I'm not saying he's checked out, but I don't think he's lived up to his calling card. And therefore, let's see what Brooks Baldwin can actually do in center with a game tied or up 1. Because remember, if Luis Robert Jr. gets traded by next year's deadline, Baldwin is likely your everyday center fielder. So you got to get him some reps. And that is why when Brooke Fletcher said on the TV broadcast that Mike Tauchman was out of the lineup because he's dealing with veteran ailments, I was like, I'm good with Tauchman being shut down this week. He doesn't need to play anymore. Just like I'm fine with the decision to put Andrew Benintendi on the 10-day IL with Achilles tendonitis. And while I don't think Corey Julks, Dominic Fletcher, or Will Robinson are going to make some dramatic last case pitch to be considered for an expanded role in 2026, I would still rather have those depth guys get potentially up to 24 at-bats this week apiece than Mike Tauchman try to increase his numbers for a potential salary arbitration hearing. I'm even fine this week if Corey Lee gets a run in left field like he was pressed into action on Sunday. Because if you're going to carry 3 catchers so the manager feels comfortable having Edgar Carroll and Kyle Teal in the lineup together, at least find some other things for Lee to do rather than pinch run. I do have a feeling, people are talking, well, they might be able to trade Corey Lee. I have a feeling they're going to keep him. And I have a feeling they're going to run with 3 catchers again. Maybe not right away. I could see, I don't know. I think Lee's got another option. I don't have it off the top of my head. But I could see, Lee starting the year at AAA. But eventually, they're probably going to bring him back up again to be like, hey, we got to have Teal and Carroll in the lineup. And apparently, that makes Will Venable feel more secure. But I still don't get why not use this week to have Teal play left? I mean, try it. It's not going to hurt you. But I was thinking when I saw Taylor try to play throw the runner at home, throw the runner out at home game, going with that strategy, I was like, why not give Brooks Baldwin a rep there? Why not see what he can do? He doesn't have the most powerful arm, but, I'm not saying he's going to do any better, but right now, he's the starting center fielder. And if and when this team moves on from Luis Robert Jr. next season, he's probably your starting center fielder, unless they sign an upgrade over Michael A. Taylor to have a better depth. And if you got to go to a late inning defensive replacement for your center fielder, then you don't have a center fielder. I mean, the only exception is you literally have Brian Anderson or Adam Engel on your bench who are young and elite defenders. Then, yeah, I get it because they can't hit the rest of the game, through most of the game, but they can definitely get to that final out. But Taylor's old, and I've noticed, while still solid defensively, he's not going to cover every ball like he used to. And Tauchman, if his legs are bothering him, give him the season off. Let him go home if he wants to for the rest of the week. He's the bridge right fielder. He's established that. Figure out a figure that works for his final year of arbitration for next season and have him ready to go to spring training. And Benintendi, I don't think we've seen the last of him in a White Sox uniform. I just don't see many contenders lining up to acquire a replacement level DH, even if the Sox cover most of his salary, because that's what he is right now. I mean, the most ideal team would be the Boston Red Sox, and they're pretty much set in the outfield and in DH. Again, they're probably going to have to get rid of some guys in the offseason. So it's just really hard for me to find a contender being like, well, I'll cover $10 million of the rest of his salary. And I don't see that happening. So you're basically stuck with this dude. So no Way Back Wednesday segment today, as I want to discuss baseball announcing the automated balls and strikes challenge system for next season. And let's discuss that after the break. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And I'm always telling FanDuel's traditional money lines, spreads, and over-unders, they're fun to play. I'm always telling you that. But if you want to win big or at least double or triple your money, play FanDuel's props, parlays, and futures. For example, tomorrow's Seattle at Arizona game, FanDuel has the same game parlay featuring Kenneth Walker III, Trey Benson, Jackson Smith and Jimba, and Marvin Harrison Jr., all scoring an anytime touchdown. That was at plus 3101 the last time I checked. So if that's still the number, it might have gone up. Who knows? But if it hits and you put, say, $10 on it, and if it was at plus 3101, you could win $310.13. And you think Chicago can beat Vegas on Sunday and both teams hitting the over at 47.5 points. Well, that's at plus 270 the last time I checked. And if you put $10 on that, and if it hits, you just won $27. So you pretty much nearly tripled your money. FanDuel is quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bets. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. And make sure if you do subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notifications. So that way you get the the little bell alert when episodes are posted, whether if I go live or I've got other shorts going on. So make sure to turn that on there. So baseball is once again embracing modern technology, and I am all for it. Baseball announced the Automated Balls and Strikes Challenge System, also known as the ABS Challenge System, will be enforced for next season. Now, to the traditionalists, technology is fine, especially when you've seen inconsistent strike zones for the history of the game. Let's actually have a system where you can actually implement the strike zone as it was written up to be. And thankfully, the White Sox do have a young enough roster that pretty much is used to the system in the minors. So they know it. And it was piloted in spring training, and it's going to be just like it was in spring training. Each team is going to get 2 challenges. Only pitchers, catchers, and hitters can challenge, and it has to be immediately, after the pitch. You can't go back and be like, well, let's review ball 2, actually. And it's quick. Doesn't take forever. Takes like 20 seconds compared to some other, replay challenges you've seen. So great, let's do it. Although I've seen some comments, whether it's in the YouTube community page, I think I got an email about it too, about why can't the strike zone just be fully automated? Why can't they just have it fully automated? And then the home plate umpire is only there to cover, plays at the plate. Well, I don't have the answer, but I wonder if the umpires union's CBA running through 2029 has something to do with it. Because I'm sure with a collective bargaining agreement in place, I don't think the umpires union is going to be like, oh, yeah, devalue my job. That's okay. And I think, remember, the umpires have a union. They're going to probably fight like tooth and nail to at least keep some semblance of significance in the game. Because otherwise, they're just, with an automated strike zone, then they just become plate monitors. That's what they're going to monitor. Plays at the plate, that type of stuff. So I think this is the compromise of you're going to still have the human element, but there's a challenge system, which I think is fine. Because for the most part, we know balls right down the middle are strikes, obviously. But you do need to have a challenge system in place for when umpires decide to arbitrarily expand the strike zone or shrink it. And how many times have we seen, a couple days ago, was it the Padres game where any ball thrown down in the zone was just not called a strike, even if it definitely hit, the strike zone on the graphic that you saw and on StatCast. That umpire was just not calling it a strike. Everything had to be a little bit up. And I'm sorry, but a strike is a strike, And with the worries about players challenging things like, say, too early in the game, remember, you do have a young team used to this in the minors, as it's been there for a while. And obviously things seem to be working out very well in the minor leagues. And you can always implement a strategy of just don't challenge anything outside of, turning the count from, say, 0-1 to 1-0 if you're a hitter. On the flip side, if you're a pitcher, trying, you get something called a ball first pitch, because obviously getting that first pitch, either for a ball or strike, can dictate who's in control of the at bat. And then obviously you're going to challenge, a called third strike, for example, or if you're a pitcher, a called ball four, that type of stuff. But otherwise, yeah, if you're challenging like, hey, this is a strike two, I think that's a waste of time. Just get on with it, man. Battle back. And you don't want to risk too many challenges, obviously. Although I wonder how this is actually going to impact the always entertaining arguing of balls and strikes with the umpires, like the players losing their mind, or the manager running out, because unless you're out of challenges, there's no need to say, hey ump, your strike zone stinks. Hey ump, that bleeps outside. Or the pitcher, really? That type of stuff, because you have a challenge system now. So, maybe the performative part of the game is going to erode a little bit because of this. But I think this is going to make the game better. And I'm glad baseball is embracing technology. And think about it, they've got this in tennis. And Wimbledon still has all the pageantry and tradition. Still fine. Still a good game there. And I'm not poo-pooing having a fully automated strike zone, because I'm for it, because I hate how pitch framing is becoming a skill. An optical illusion should not be why Yasmani Grandal still has value in the game, because he can't do anything else well. Well, he used to have value, but he couldn't do anything else well outside of get on base and have some power. He could not play catcher. Backing up balls, pop time, all those other things he couldn't do well. But man, he could still get a job because he frames pitches well. He can trick the umpire. I hate that. I don't think an optical illusion is a skill. It's not. And that's the only reason why I would be all for it. And then some hitters like Edgar Carroll could also benefit from this, like Sean Anderson pointed out, former host of this show and now host of the CHGO White Sox podcast. He tweeted this out from Baseball Savant. Edgar Carroll must be pumped, and that's at Sean _W Anderson. Kind of going over, looking like between him and Kyle Teal, where they've gotten called strikes, whether it's, just outside the zone. Think about that, 0 to 1 inches outside the zone. Edgar Carroll's gotten 21 called strikes. So that type of stuff. So, that's going to help Edgar Carroll, I think, in a little bit, a little bit on the margins. So it can help some guys, if you have an automated system, to do a little bit better at the plate on the margins. Although I wonder how Mike Vassell will work now with the ABS system, because I remember reading the scouting report about him. One of the reasons why his numbers were a little bit high at AAA last year with the Mets was the ABS is, he got squeezed by the ABS. It's in the scouting report. If you still look it up, like what MLB.com had about that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, or listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow to do a retro segment that I normally do today. But again, I want to discuss the ABS system being implemented for next year, and Andrew Benintendi going on the 10-day IL, and just some other things. Kind of, I was like, I want to focus that on today. So we'll do a throwback Thursday tomorrow. Well, feel free to leave comments about today's discussion on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or you can leave them on X, formerly Twitter, at LockedOnSox or at ToddJDub. Also, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, feel free to leave a 5-star review at wherever you get your podcast. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.